Story 1. Halloween was my favourite holiday growing up. Now I absolutely hate it. I won't sugarcoat it. I hate Halloween. The cool weather, the creepy decorations, the sound of children giggling as they bounce down the sidewalk. I can't stand it. I know that makes me sound like a Grinch, but hear me out. I have a good reason. As a child, Halloween was my favourite holiday. Yeah, Christmas was great and all, but there was just something different about spooky season that really hit home with me. Well, until I turned 11, that is. That was the year that something truly heinous happened. Something that turned my favourite holiday into the most dreaded day of the year.
Your costume looks great, kiddo. You're supposed to be a Power Ranger, right?
Uncle Ricky asked, taking a sip from his cider. I frowned. No, I'm Raphael. Uncle Ricky's brows furrowed. From Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? He stared at me blankly. I could practically see the cogs trying and failing to turn in his head.
You know what? Whatever it is, it looks great. Fantastic job, buddy.
He ruffled my hair before draining the remainder of his cider. I took a step back, staring at the ground.
Guess what? My
ding-dong. The sound of the doorbell cut him off mid-sentence. That's probably Chris. See you later, Uncle Ricky. I raced to the door and flung it open to find Captain America standing before me. Chris's costume was detailed. From the suit, to the cape, to the shield, he had it all. His parents must have spent a pretty penny on it. Come on, Chris, let's go, I said, ushering him down the driveway. We'd made it about halfway down when Uncle Ricky appeared at the door.
You boys be safe now. Wouldn't want anything to happen to you.
I shuddered. Something about the way he said that made me feel uneasy. We will be, I shouted back, still speed walking away. Hey man, what gives? Why are we walking so fast? Chris demanded once we'd reached the sidewalk. It's Uncle Ricky. I don't like being around him. He's weird. Like what kind of weird? I shifted my gaze to the plastic pumpkin bucket swinging back and forth in my hand. I don't know. I don't want to talk about it anymore, okay? Fine. Let's hit that house first. I heard they give out king-size chocolate bars. Chris and I trick-or-treated until well past sundown. To my dismay, even though I wore a turtle shell backpack and a red bandana, most people automatically assumed that I was the Hulk. Eventually, I just stopped correcting them. By 9 o'clock, all the other kids had already gone home, and I was getting tired of people thinking that I was Chris's sidekick. This is getting heavy. Are you ready to go back yet? I asked. Come on, just one more house, then we'll...
Hey boys, nice costumes you've got there.
We froze. I didn't know why, but my heart began to thunder in my chest at the sound of that man's voice. We slowly turned to face him. What I saw still sends chills down my spine to this day. A tall figure stood before us. He wore a leather jacket and jeans, and a red splattered hockey mask shrouded his face from view. Even through the thin plastic, I could hear his ragged breathing. The shallow rise and fall of his chest as he stood there, that predatory stare boring into me. But that's not what frightened me the most. The man was holding a machete, one that was dripping with a dark crimson liquid. Chris and I didn't even say anything to each other. We didn't need to. We took off in a dead sprint, booking it down the sidewalk. I didn't have to look back to know that man was in hot pursuit. My legs pumped as fast as they could go, and I tried my hardest to focus on getting to safety. But I couldn't shake this nagging feeling at the back of my head. The feeling that if I didn't do something, That Halloween would be my last. Help us! Help us! I shrieked, praying that someone would come to our rescue, but no one did. The streets were empty, completely devoid of life. If anyone had heard my cries from inside their homes, they could have fooled me. Everyone probably thought it was just some dumb teenager pulling a Halloween prank. Little did they know, Chris and I were running for our lives. After what felt like an eternity, curiosity got the better of me and I chanced a look back at our pursuer. My stomach instantly twisted into knots. He was gaining on us. Adrenaline took over and I racked my brain for ideas. My candy bucket! I'd worked all night collecting my bounty, but in that moment I didn't care. I just wanted to make it back home in one piece. I held the plastic pumpkin behind me with as much strength as I could muster. I watched as it ricocheted off the man's arm and landed on someone's lawn, spilling its contents into their grass. My heart sank. I was out of ideas. This way, Chris yelled, pointing down a side street. My face lit up. We were still out of earshot at that distance, but I could see a woman and a young child walking along the sidewalk further ahead of us. With how far we'd strayed from our houses, she was the only chance we had at escaping from that lunatic. Just when I thought that we might make it out there alive, the unthinkable happened. I tripped. Time seemed to slow as I went sprawling to the unforgiving concrete. I landed hard, scraping both of my knees in the process. I wailed in agony as tears blurred my vision. I was so dazed from the fall that I had almost completely forgotten about the predicament I was in. Until I heard the man's laboured breathing hovering directly above me. I suddenly felt someone grab my arm and shove me onto my butt. I never had been more terrified than I was in that moment. The fear was so overwhelming that I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I could barely even breathe. My assailant didn't waste his opportunity. He dropped to his knees and began crawling towards me on all fours like an animal. The machete dragged along the sidewalk, its sharp, crimson-coated blade clinking against the concrete as he advanced. My breath hitched in my throat as the man loomed over me mere inches from my face. His dark, soulless eyes stared into mine. He leaned in so close that I could smell his breath. Then to my horror, he brought the machete up to my neck. My mind raced as he lightly slid it across my throat. My entire body trembled when he placed his fingers to the fresh wound and dipped them into the blood seeping from within. I watched, feeling as the world was crumbling around me as the man reached underneath the hockey mask and plunged his fingers into his mouth. "You taste incredible," he whispered, raising the machete again. My eyes grew wide as dinner plates, but this time for a different reason. In the blink of an eye, the man was lying on the ground with a rivulet of red seeping from his scalp. Chris tossed a brick to the ground beside him and pulled me to my feet. I'd never been so happy to see him in my entire life. "Snap out of it! We have to go!" Chris shouted, tugging me down the street. I glanced at the man one more time before we took off. That scene is one that will be burned into my brain for as long as I live. Once we made it back to my house, I snapped. I cried uncontrollably for hours, and nothing could get me to calm down. Of course, the cops were called, but the man had vanished by the time they arrived at the scene. I was inconsolable for weeks afterwards, and not just because of what happened to me. You see, when I glanced back that one final time, my attacker's mask had slipped, revealing part of his face. The image of my uncle lying there, still gripping the machete, is one I will never forget. Uncle Ricky disappeared after that night, and I never told my parents that he was the one chasing me. I don't know if they ever made the connection, but I didn't plan on ever bringing it up, because my own memories of that event are painful enough, and I never wanted to relive that trauma. But now, I think I've changed my mind. Because yesterday, as I was returning from the pumpkin patch with my wife and my daughter, I noticed something lying on a chair on our porch. My blood instantly ran cold when I saw it. A machete, a hockey mask, and a photo were neatly arranged on the cushion. My hands shook as I rummaged through them, and when I picked up the picture and held it up to my face, all the awful events from that night came flooding back. The photograph was of my daughter playing in our front yard, and on the back, written in crimson, was a note that said, "I really hope she tastes as incredible as you did." Story 2. When the Halloween decorations start bleeding. Am I going to be charged with murder? The detective sighed. He did not answer. His eyes were tired, haunted. "Just help us get to the bottom of this," he said. "Okay," I answered. "I'll do my best." I could hear the tremor in my voice. I hadn't stopped shaking since it happened. I'd had a strong drink to settle my nerves. It hadn't worked. "Let's start at the beginning," said the detective. "You were having a Halloween party?" Yeah, I said. "We do it every year. We take turns hosting and the whole block participates. This year, it was our turn." "So you're the one who set up the decorations?" "Yeah," I said. Oh, God, that sounds bad, but it wasn't just me. It was lots of people. I was mostly just supervising. "Can you give me a list of who was involved?" Yeah, it was... I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. Just give me a moment to calm down. I can give you the list." "That's okay. We can come back to that." Okay. "So, who was it that set up the scarecrow?" It was me," I said. "But I didn't... fuck. I mean, I didn't do that. I set it up the night before. Someone must have come in during the night and... Oh, God." The room swayed. My breath became sharp and fast. My heart ratcheted up its pace to breakneck speed, and darkness began to close in around my vision. "Hey," the detective said. "Just calm down. You're hyperventilating. Take long, calm breaths." I did as he said. My heart slowed, but the panic remained. "Thanks," I said. "Do you think you can keep going?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just give me a moment." My body convulsed with tremors, but in a few minutes they had settled down to a mild shaking in my hands. I gulped down a hard knot in my throat. "Okay," I said. "I'm ready." "So, the scarecrow?" the detective prompted. The word filled me with dread. "The scarecrow," I repeated numbly. "It's a Halloween tradition." "The neighbors said as much. You destroy it every year?" "Yeah," I said. "Usually it's filled with candy and straw, like a piñata. The kids beat it with sticks and everyone has a good time. I just don't understand. God, why would someone do that?" "It's too early to speculate," said the detective. "Right now, we are just gathering the facts. When did you notice that something was wrong?" "Well, right away I noticed that the scarecrow wasn't coming apart as easily as it should have been. But I just thought that I had put it together too well, so I grabbed a stick and..." "Yes?" "I took a swing." The detective leaned forward. "And then what happened?" My shoulders slumped. My mouth was cottony and dry. "And then," I said, "the scarecrow began to bleed and..." There was a pregnant pause. The detective's eyes bored into mine, willing me to continue. He said nothing and I had to fill the silence. "It fell over," I said. "The hat came off and we saw that it was a body." What happened then?" The kids started screaming. One girl started it, the Oakley girl, I think. Then they all went off. The other parents and I, we pulled them all away. We called the police and, well, that's it. You know the rest. The detective scribbled his last note and closed the fold-top notebook he'd been writing in. His eyes were hard, dull grey stone, impossible to read. When he spoke again, his words were measured and careful. His voice was soft.
"What interests me, Mr. Johnson," he said, "is that you haven't asked about your wife."
This question caught me completely off guard. My wife? I said. She's out of town. Oh God, she's going to freak when she finds out what happened. She hates the Halloween block party enough as it is.
"Your wife is out of town?"
prodded the detective. The question poked a fresh wound. Yes, I said, forgetting my fear in the moment of irritation. She and my son are spending the holiday with her parents in Virginia.
"That seems strange," the detective said. "A family spending a holiday apart?"
I got the feeling he knew something more than he was letting on. Have you talked to her? I asked.
"I'd like to hear your side."
My wife and I, we're going through a rough patch right now, I said. But I don't see how this is relevant.
"It's our job to gather all the information," he said. "Then we can decide what is and is not relevant. Why was your wife not spending the holiday with you?"
I sighed. I wasn't proud of it, but I was getting flustered. I could feel hot blood rising to my face. We're separated, I said.
"Why is that?"
It's personal.
"Your wife said that it was related to infidelity."
So you have talked to her?
"Yes."
Fine, I said. You know, I cheated on my wife, I destroyed our family, it's all my fault. Now I've had a hell of a day, so if you don't mind, can you please tell me what the fuck this has to do with anything? The detective paused. He spoke softly.
"Your wife is in police custody, Mr. Johnson."
What?
"I'm sorry to have to tell you this," he said, "but she has rendered a full confession."
A full confession for what? What the hell are you talking about?
"It happens occasionally in cases of separation," he said. "One party feels the need to punish the other. Unfortunately, the children are sometimes used as a tool to that end."
The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The room swam, bile rose in my throat. Oh God, I gasped. Oh God, no.
"I'm afraid we have positively identified the remains as belonging to your son, Ben," he said.
The scream died in my throat. I blacked out. Story 3. A trick-or-treater has been coming to my house every night. It's not Halloween yet. I want to start out by saying that I don't know what this thing is. All I know is that I don't want it around me, and I can guarantee you that you wouldn't either. Regarding a brief background, I bought my house recently. Nothing special, just a medium-sized place located in a relatively safe suburb. I have a girlfriend, Lara, but she doesn't live with me for personal reasons. At the moment, I'm here by myself. I'm painting the situation because this is the kind of place where kids would go trick-or-treating, not some decrepit apartment building, not some house in the middle of nowhere, right here in suburban America. The first time that it came was 4 days ago at around 9 p.m. I was sitting in my office working on a document when I heard a knock at my door and the characteristic little kid voice saying, "Trick or treat!" Not some weird demonic tone. It sounded exactly like a regular upbeat kid. I just brushed it off as some fundraising thing and decided not to open the door. I was extremely busy after all. Out of curiosity, I peeked out my window, watching as the kid
dressed up in some kind of Grim Reaper costume, walked down the street. Off the bat, there were two weird things about this. First of all, there were no adults with him. I didn't get a look at his face, but there was no way he was older than 5. Second of all, he didn't knock on any other door. I watched as he walked past every other house until disappearing at a turn. Despite the obscurity of this, it was still a pretty sad sight, but nothing that I thought about for too long. It didn't come back again until the following night, and this is where the detour to hell fucking no territory begins. I was out with Lara, and we were both drunk when we got back. It was late as hell, so we decided to put on a horror movie before going off to bed. About halfway into the film, we heard a knock at the door. An upbeat "trick or treat" followed. Lara was quick to react. "What the fuck?" I remember her whispering to me. I hadn't told her about the first time it happened because I didn't deem it noteworthy after all. I looked at her without saying anything and just put a finger up to my lips. Shh. It was barely even a conscious decision. It almost felt instinctive at the time. I got up from the couch and made my way over to the door. Quietly, I looked through the peephole, seeing the same thing in the Grim Reaper outfit from before. It was wearing a mask, so I couldn't see its face. I really wanted to ignore it, but at the time I just thought it was a kid, you know, not to be rude, but what if he wasn't right or something? In any case, I reluctantly opened the door. It didn't move or say anything at first, so I asked it something along the lines of, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" No response. All right then. I turned around to face Lara and asked what she was thinking. No response from her either. In fact, she looked horrified. "What's wrong?" "Don't look at it," was her immediate response. "Close the fucking door," she screamed. Her sudden outburst made me jump, but I did what she said. "What the hell was that?" I asked her. She shook her head, still sporting the same horrific expression. "I don't know," she said. I looked back through the peephole, but the only thing I saw was the kid walking away with his back towards me. I spent the night trying to convince her to just tell me what she'd seen, but her response was always the same. "I don't know." At a point, she just screamed at me to stop. "I told you, all right? I don't know." That was all I can get out of her. She just didn't know. Whatever the hell that meant. She left immediately the next morning, and it was pretty obvious to me that she wasn't coming back for a while. I did get a parting text from her though. It read, "If it comes back, don't open the door." Safe to say I was reasonably disturbed. Was she playing a prank on me? Seems rather elaborate if you ask me. That couldn't be it. She'd never done anything like that before. Besides, she seemed genuinely terrified. But it was the only explanation that I could muster up at the time. So I just went with it. Whenever I would talk to her after that, she never brought it up. I thought that she was just trying to pretend like she had nothing to do with it and she had something bigger planned for me later on. So I decided to go along with it as well. The following night came and I mentally prepared myself for anything that she was intending to pull. I decided to stay in order to get some work done. It was around midnight and I was ready to head downstairs to play some Xbox before going to bed. Then I heard it. "Trick or treat!" Now, if Lara was the one doing this, then she would have wanted me to ignore it. But I could catch her off guard if I actually opened the door, right?
The kid was probably one of her cousins or something. Weird that she's making him stay out so late, but hey, anything to scare me, I suppose. I looked through my peephole, once again seeing the Grim Reaper costume. I forced myself to laugh. "What's Lara paying you, kid?" I asked him jokingly through the door. What a mistake that was. "Trick or treat!" The statement was repeated, louder this time. It caught me so off guard, but I couldn't place why. And then I thought about it. The words didn't seem to come from the kid's mouth, but more from a general area behind him, if you get what I'm saying. I didn't react, continuing to look through, having no idea what to anticipate. "Trick or treat!" It was deafening the third time. I jolted backwards before scrambling onto the couch. What the hell? I thought to myself. I remained stiff for the next few moments, petrified at whatever the hell was standing on my doorstep. I waited and waited, but nothing happened. I was about to go up to my room when I saw the police lights flashing outside. They rang my doorbell and started asking me questions. "Have you seen anything disturbing recently?" "Well, I think some kids are playing a prank on me, but not really." What was I supposed to say to him? When I asked him why he'd come, he responded by telling me that a neighbour had called in, saying she'd seen something horrible standing at my door. No descriptions beyond that, just something horrible. The cop eventually decided that the woman was just off her rocker, but to call if anything else happened. I thanked him and he left. The next day, I rang my neighbour's doorbell, hoping to get some answers. I could hear somebody moving around inside, but nobody ever came. Looks like she didn't want to tell me anything either. I relayed what happened to Lara, and she was understandably shocked. If this was a prank, then there was no way that she wasn't going to call it off at this point. This brings me up to yesterday night. I can safely say now that this was never a prank. I was in a cab, coming home late after a night out at the bar with some work friends. As we pulled up to my house, I was preparing to drunkenly stumble out when the driver said something that froze my blood. "Who's standing at your door there?" I didn't turn to face what he was referring to. "Keep driving," I told him. He started to ask me what was going on, but I cut in immediately. "Just keep driving." But the guy just wouldn't fucking go. "What do you mean go?" "It's some kid. It's almost 1 a.m. What's he doing out here? Look, we have to call He stopped mid-sentence. My head was still facing away from whatever the hell was standing at my door, but I could hear the driver's breathing begin to tense. I heard him mutter out, "Fuck!" before he slammed the gas. I barely had time to react, my head slamming the seat as he took off. I looked over, witnessing his traumatized expression as he sped away. "What did you see?" I yelled at him. All that he responded with was incoherent babbling. At moments, I could make out, "No, didn't see," in his speech. I was so focused on trying to get him to talk that I didn't even notice where we were going. Suddenly, I felt the impact. He'd driven us off the road into a local wooded area. I'd put my seatbelt on, so I was mostly fine, but the driver was knocked unconscious. I dialed 911 and told them what happened. Well, not exactly what happened, just something that they would believe. That the driver had gone insane and driven us into a tree. At first, they set their suspicions on me. No surprise there, but that premise was wiped out when the driver woke up, babbling the same shit he'd been babbling in the car. Nobody got any answers out of him. He remained in a petrified, incoherent state. They tested him for drugs and alcohol, but nothing was in his system. Eventually, he was whisked away for some psychological tests. While I was getting treated for my minor head wound, a detective visited me. He told me that there were signs of a break-in at my house, called in at around 1:30 a.m. The window in my basement had been smashed and my front door had been left wide open. In the morning, I went back and looked everything over. It was indeed a mess. My Xbox and laptop were on the ground. The cash I'd hidden in my drawer looked like it had been thrown across my living room, with bills scattered everywhere. But with all that said, nothing had actually been taken. Beyond the window in the basement, nothing really needed to be fixed either. It looked as if whoever was here was in the process of stealing my shit when they dropped everything and ran out the front door. That was law enforcement's conclusion anyway. Not very logical, but logic isn't something that I would expect at this point. I have a feeling that something else happened. Something far worse. Story 4. Halloween Fever. I'm not sure when Abe first got obsessed with Halloween, but I knew about it before we even started dating. I actually met him for the first time at a costume party. I was dressed as an apple, and by that I mean I wore a red dress and a green hat. I threw it together last minute since my friend was the one dragging me to the party. Abe was dressed as a werewolf stuck between wolf and man. The amount of effort he put into his costume was remarkable. He even walked like a halfling and howled at incoming party guests. Something drew us together. Maybe it was our mutual hatred of candy corn, or the way we could both down 5 beers without even blinking. Whatever it was, it led to a first date, and within 7 months, we were engaged. The thing I loved most about Abe was his ambition. He was a business major with plans on starting his own company. He would design and produce Halloween-themed goods for haunted houses. He explained to me that more and more ordinary people were opening up their homes in the spirit of a good scare, and he wanted to support that by making unique and frightening products. Plus, he dreamed of having his own haunted house someday. It wasn't my cup of tea, but I adored his passion. We were married in May and pregnant by June. Abe decided to use his savings to buy us a nice little house right outside the city. The neighborhood was full of families and right next to an elementary school. Our neighbors to the left were Paul and Jake, a wonderful young couple who had 2 small children. We bonded with them right away. All seemed fine except for one thing. Dirk. Dirk lived to the right of us. He was a white man in his mid-50s who took one look at our biracial family and nearly had a conniption. When he saw us walking or working in the yard, he would give the Nazi salute and belly laugh as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever done. It wasn't just us he tortured. No one in the neighborhood liked him. He would leave his poor dog out in the rain all day, chained roughly to his porch. His wife was a small woman who endured a vast vocabulary of insults day and night. If a kid's ball flew into his yard, he made a point to pick it up and carry it inside. It was almost like he tried to do everything possible to make himself hated. But oddly, there was a one-day exception to his cruelty, and that was Halloween. Our first year in the neighborhood, we got to experience Dirk's haunted house. Abe had been longingly planning one of his own, but it was simply out of our budget this year. So when we found out our loudmouth racist neighbor had one, we were more than a little shocked. We were having coffee with Paul and Jake on a cold October day when we heard about the event. "He does it every year," Jake said, juggling their 2-year-old. "It's his thing." "But do you go?" Abe asked, confused. Of course, Paul laughed. It's the one time of a year when the man's demeanour actually matches the occasion. Plus, it's genuinely scary in there. He must work on the props all year round, and he never uses the same thing twice. Paul and I were nervous to go at first, Jake admitted, but literally everyone in the neighbourhood shows up. People even let their kids in there. And you know I wouldn't let either of mine near his house. It's just like Halloween is his or something. He can be as evil as he wants and it just works. Abe and I were still a little scared, and not in a good way, of Dirk's haunted house, but we decided to go and at least judge for ourselves. We got to the door and Dirk's wife was standing outside handing out tickets. She took one look at my pregnant belly and shook her head. "Not for you," she said in a shaky off-killer tone. "Why?" "Too scary. Not want to risk the baby." She handed Abe a ticket and shooed me with her fingers. "I'll go in and tell you how it was," he said kindly. "I'm sure it's terrible anyway." So I went home. I was a little disappointed, but being scared wasn't really my thing anyway. Abe came home and round an hour later, he was frowning and looked awful. "Babe, how was Dirk's house?" His demeanour didn't change as he slumped down on the couch. In a sad, almost hurt voice, he replied, "It was incredible." Surprised, I urged him to tell me more. He had an entire room where blood poured from the walls. Animatronic ghosts jumped out at you when you least expected it. There was an empty cradle with a trail of blood. It was a perfect mixture of disturbing and downright scary. The best part was that the only time you actually had to interact with Dirk was when he was playing the torture victim. Watching him scream was so satisfying, but it didn't make up for the fact that this jerk, this guy who's basically the epitome of all things arsehole, is better than Halloween than I am. "Sweetie," I laughed, "I know you love Halloween, but just because Dirk makes a good haunted house, it doesn't make him better than you. Next year, I'm sure you'll knock it right out of the park." He gave a small smile, and I thought it was over. But it wasn't. Abe talked constantly about the perfection of Dirk's haunted house. He would make guesses at how things were put together. He spent his free time building prototypes to mimic Dirk's props or even improve upon them. This went on for months. A huge animatronic witch had taken over our living room. Robotic spiders prowled the hallway. The only room he didn't touch was the nursery. But soon we had a little one to occupy our time. Ophelia, Fee for short. She was born in March and was absolutely perfect. She was born with a full head of curly black hair. Maybe I had a bias, but I had honestly never seen a more beautiful infant. I loved her from the instant I held her in my arms. Abe was no different. We doted on our baby girl as much as possible, and Abe was an excellent father. I loved to watch them interact. He was so gentle with her. His only flaw was his continued obsession with the haunted house. When he wasn't at work or playing with Fee, he was designing his perfect house for Halloween. We had a few fights about him doing the creepy stuff around Fee, and soon he had moved all the gear to the basement. He told me he would only bring it back out for Halloween. When October came, Abe was feverish with excitement. The plan was to make a haunted house like nothing anyone had ever seen. Not only would it be scary while you were inside, but the fear would last for nights afterward. He wanted to really freak people out, cause nightmares, make his exhibit unforgettable. I believed he could do it. With his imagination and engineering background, anything was possible. He started to advertise his haunted house a week or so before Halloween. I think his goal was to get as many people there as possible. He left flyers in people's mailboxes and under their windshield wipers. He even left one for Dirk. This was a mistake. Dirk was instantly banging on our door. Abe was still out flyering, but I greeted Dirk as politely as I could for someone whom I absolutely despised. "Hello, Dirk," I said civilly. "What the fuck is this?" he screamed through my screen door. In his hand was one of Abe's flyers. "Keep your voice down." I turned around to check on Fee, who was gurgling sleepily in her swing. Before I knew what was happening, Dirk had burst through the screen door and had his arm around my neck. "Your husband think he can take over in my neighborhood, in my territory?" His arm dug into my throat. "Please, Dirk, you're hurting me." Tears fell down my cheeks. I was all alone. I knew Dirk was a bully, but I didn't know he could be dangerous. "I could do much worse to you." He pushed me to the floor and stood over me. "You tell your darky husband that if he goes through with the haunted house, I'll kill him. No, I'll kill you first, then your little abomination over there, and I'll make him watch." He spat at my face. "No one crosses me." With that, he slammed the front door and left me on the ground, sobbing. Fee had woken up and was crying as well. Shakily, I got to my feet and I called Abe. He told me to call the police, but I was too scared. Dirk was a violent man. I just sat on the floor rocking Fee until Abe came home. He did everything to make me safer. He wrapped us up in his blankets and made me hot chocolate. With hurt in his voice, he pleaded with me to call the police. I don't want to make it worse," I said softly. "But he's just a bully, a racist asshole." I looked him in the eye. "You have to promise me you won't do a haunted house this year." Abe's mouth fell open. "Come on, that means he wins." I don't care what it means. I don't want that man anywhere near us." Abe shook his head. "This haunted house means the world to me." I glared at him. "More than me? More than Fee?" He didn't say anything. Instead, he kissed my forehead and stroked Fee's cheek. I could see in his face that he regretted what he said. It was so hurtful, but I knew it came from a place of pain and not cruelty. I put Fee in her crib and went to bed. Abe kissed me deeply. He stroked my hair and whispered that everything would be okay. I felt confident that this was all over. I wish I had been right, but in those blissful hours of sleep, I had forgotten the violent monster that was our neighbor. By the time we woke up, Abe made a self-care plan for me. He would buy me a few nights at a hotel over Halloween. That way I would feel safer and free from Dirk. He said he would stay at home and take care of Fee. Although I was nervous to leave, Abe convinced me that it would be the best for everyone. He would keep an eye on the house and make sure nothing sinister went on with Dirk. I begged Abe to come with me. He explained that having the baby around might cause extra anxiety for me. Plus, I deserved a few days to relax. Reluctantly, I left my family for Halloween weekend. I have to admit, it was a wonderful hotel. It had a full spa, a swimming pool, a salon, and even a 5-star restaurant. My first day, I took advantage of everything. The massages and bubble baths did quite a bit to help ease my fear. I wrapped myself in a fluffy robe and ordered room service. It was pure luxury. I called Abe a little after 5. He said everything was fine and Dirk hadn't bothered him at all. He even let me talk to little Fee, who babbled into the phone. I giggled. I was so blessed. Abe told me just to take care of myself and come home once tomorrow was over. On Halloween morning, I awoke in a cushy bed, covered in delicate blankets, feeling incredible. My night had been full of dreams of Dirk moving away, and I stayed in bed leisurely until I got hungry. I wandered down to the restaurant and treated myself to the largest waffle I'd ever seen. I then spent the afternoon getting my nails done, and I felt great. Around 4, I called Abe to check in. He didn't answer, and I figured maybe he was running an errand. I went back to my room and called again at 4:30. Still no answer. My chest got tight. It wasn't like Abe not to answer the phone. I called again at 4:45. After still no answer, I started to panic. I called Paul and Jake. Paul answered.
Hey love, what's up?
He sounded surprised to hear from me. I was wondering if you might be willing to go check on Abe and Fee. He isn't answering the phone and I'm getting worried.
He laughed. I just saw him. He's fine.
I breathed a long sigh of relief. Oh, thank God. Paul, I was so scared.
The only thing to be scared of is your house, Paul chuckled. Sounds like it's opening up soon.
I paused. What are you talking about?
Your house? Paul said, confused. Abe's been working on it all weekend. It looks amazingly creepy. Your guy is definitely going to beat Dirk this year.
I began to hyperventilate. This couldn't be true. Paul, listen to me closely. Are you saying Abe is putting on a haunted house?
Yes.
Paul probably thought I was insane.
Is everything okay?
I tried to respond, but the phone fell from my hand. I could hear Paul talking on the other end, but I couldn't handle it. Abe had broken my trust. He'd gone behind my back, and he endangered us. Who knows what Dirk could do to him? To Fee. Without a word, I gathered my things, hanging up on a concerned Paul. I left the hotel without checking out. I had to get home as soon as possible. The streets were full of people in costumes. There were a ton of traffic. I anxiously waited for the lights to turn green. A man on the street started screaming, and I nearly rear-ended the car in front of me. I was completely on edge. Too many people who looked dead, too many monsters. I tried to go as fast as I could, but it took me over an hour to get home. When I arrived, I barely recognized it. Abe had transformed the entire outside of the house into a ramshackle hovel. He used broken boards to construct a facade covering the front. Out of one window hung a very realistic-looking body which twitched when the wind hit it. There was a large sign by the door painted in red, "Come in, but don't expect to come out." I watched as some of our neighbours entered the house, giggling in fear. Abe was nowhere to be seen. Terrified, I parked the car and went inside. The first thing I heard was the baby crying. It didn't sound like Fee, but the noise unnerved me. I could hear screams from other people in the house, and Abe had removed all our things and replaced every single room with disturbing imagery. The front hall was padded in something that looked like breathing flesh. The living room was a scene of a suicide. A man lay on the floor, surrounded by paper. The paper was littered with the scribbles of a madman. On the wall were more ramblings, but those included names of people in the neighbourhood. I checked to see if the man on the floor was Abe, but he wasn't, and I had no idea who that was, but it definitely was not a mannequin. The dining room was covered in creepy dolls. Some of them moved unexpectedly. One even reached out, and I swear it grabbed my hair. I don't know how Abe made them, but they were so disturbing. One of the dolls kept taking off her dress and putting it back on. She had deep red paint between her legs. I ran into the next room, which was the kitchen. It was a butcher shop. Slabs of meat were tossed all across the floor. Everything was rotting. Real flies and rats feasted on the remains. The fridge was shaking as though somebody were inside. I screamed, "Abe! Abe, come out here right now!" But no one responded. A group of young girls rushed by me, shrieking with frightful delight. I bit my lip and climbed the stairs towards the bedroom. I was done. Abe had gone too far. He had ruined our house. I finally got upstairs and heard someone throwing up in the bedroom. I walked in and saw that the bedroom was basically untouched. I stepped cautiously, knowing that at any minute something scary would pop up. The large witch Abe had created was sitting on the bed, but she wasn't plugged in. That's when I noticed Jake throwing up in the corner. I approached him slowly. "Jake, are you—" When he saw me, he jumped up and grabbed my shoulders. His eyes were crazy. "Get out!" he yelled. "Get outside now!" I shook him off. "So you're part of this shitstorm too?" I realized he was crying. No, please, just go outside. Paul called the police. I don't know what happened. We can't find Abe." A dead cold spread through my body. "What happened?" I demanded. Please, he begged, go outside and wait for the police. That's when I heard the group of girls start to scream. They were in the room across from the bedroom, the nursery. Any control I had left was gone. I ran from Jake into the next room. Fee's crib was in the middle of the floor. The scene was pure white except for the mobile that hung above her bed. Instead of the planets that usually hung, there was a noose. Attached to the noose was the dead body of a baby twirling slowly. I clutched my chest. It couldn't be. It had to be fake. The corpse spun just a little further and I saw the face. Her face, my beautiful Ophelia, hanging like a bloated maggot from the rope. Her skin was white. There was no blood on her, just vomit and deep marks where she was bound. I fell backwards. Something deeply human inside of me howled. Jake was suddenly beside me trying to help, but I threw him back. That bastard Dirk had gotten his revenge. Tears welled up, but I refused to let them fall. I stormed out of the house. I knew Dirk had Abe as well. I would stop whatever sick and twisted thing he was doing to my husband. Jake kept calling for me to stop, but I only had eyes for the house next door. I had no fear. I ran past his tiny wife who looked terrified of me. I didn't flinch at the jump scares or gross decor inside the house. I would find him. Dirk, I whistled menacingly, I'm coming for you. I don't even know what the inside looked like. I didn't care. I had one mission, to find the monster who did that to my daughter. It only took me a few minutes to find Dirk on his lawn, crawling in an insect costume. When he saw me, his eyes fired with rage. You bitch, he hissed. I told you not to let your husband, I finished for him, grabbing the shovel next to the house. Not to let my black husband make a stupid fucking haunted house? You're such a pathetic sack of shit that you care more about this one thing than about my child's life? His rage subsided into confusion. No, you don't get to talk. I don't know where I got the strength, but I lifted the shovel and clocked him in the jaw. He fell to the ground with a satisfying bang. You are a fucking monster, you know that? I kicked him in the stomach. After I find out what you did to my husband, I'll fucking kill you. He moaned in pain. I have no idea what you're talking about. No, I slammed him again and again in the stomach. You truly are an insect. I hovered the heel of my shoe over his left eye and pressed down. His eyeball popped like a grape. He was now screaming. Pain is too good for you. I'll make you wish you'd never spoken a word to my family. Jake ran onto the scene. He was flanked by Paul and 2 police officers who had their guns drawn. Paul took Jake's hand in fear. Jake started talking in a soft tone. Honey, you need to come with us. I turned to them, finally letting the tears out of my eyes. You saw what he did to my baby? Jake was crying too. No, you don't understand. I understand that he strangled Fee until her little heart stopped beating. My hands were in fists. Jake turned to Paul, who took over. Honey, Dirk didn't kill her. My body was shaking so much I nearly fainted. He did. He killed her and he probably killed Abe too. I can't find him. He threatened me last week. He told me he would do this. I don't know anything about last week, but we know he didn't hurt Ophelia. Paul moved towards me, lifting a gentle hand. Abe turned himself in 20 minutes ago. What? The world was suddenly still. I couldn't hear anyone crying or screaming. It was just quiet. The words hung in the air, inaudible. I could almost see them, touch them. Abe. When I came back to reality, I had been handcuffed by one of the officers. Paul was trying to speak to me as they led me away. I couldn't understand. Nothing made sense. Paul began to yell, Please, don't take her to the station. Let her stay with us. She's grieving. She didn't know. But they took me to the station anyway. I was arrested for disorderly conduct. After taking my statement, they decided to let me go back to Paul and Jake's. They held me as I cried. They held my hands as I screamed. And finally, after hours and hours, they tucked me into their bed to let me sleep. If it weren't for them, I might have ended my life that night. I'm still staying with them now as their full-time nanny. We've kind of created a new little family for ourselves, and we don't ever celebrate Halloween. In some rare speck of humanity, Dirk didn't press charges against me. I think he almost respected me for what I had done. He wears an eye patch now and he never speaks to me, but when he sees me, he lifts his chin in admiration. The violence I enacted made me more like him, but I don't like to think about it. I saw Abe twice after that. Once at his trial, where he was sentenced to 35 years in prison for the murder of our daughter. When the judge asked him about that night, he spent hours in joyful description of building the house and setting up the scenes. He exclaimed that he had officially won. His was the best haunted house anyone had ever seen. And Ophelia had been the linchpin to secure his victory. A month before the trial, I requested a meeting with him. His lawyer strongly opposed it, but he made the final choice. I went to the prison where he was being held. He sat behind a thick wall of glass. He looked horrible, and I wasn't sad about it. I lifted the receiver and pressed it to my ear. He did the same. We sat in silence for too many moments. Then finally, in a strong voice as I could muster, I asked, "Why?" He looked away from me. Isn't it obvious? When his eyes slid back into place, there was something crazy in them. His forlorn look morphed into a sinister smile. I held my breath. All he said was, "I loved Halloween more than I loved you."